Hello, everyone. Can you hear me in the back? Can you hear me in the front? That one guy can't. Okay. So we're going to get started. My name's Heather O'Call. I'm a program manager on the project development team. I'm going to stand over here because I can't see over this. So if you're right here, you're going to have to really wave if you want my attention. But I'm a program manager on the project development team. I've been there about 8 years, owning lots of different features. I'm currently the lead for the project client, and that's what I'm going to do an overview of today. So before we get started, I just want to ask, how many people feel like they have enough time in their day to solve all their problems at work? No one? Oh, Amruta? No, she's on my team, so she gets stuff done. She can. But no one else. Okay. So that's what we're going to try to help on today. So we're going to do an overview, but we're also going to do a lot of things on saving time. So I feel like in project management world, there's two kinds of problems. There's the, I need to get my schedule updated so my numbers look good and reflect in the reports and I don't get yelled at. And then there's the real problems like, oh, the team that said they were going to do this work for us is no longer doing that work. This person on our team who is supposed to be doing the critical work right now, he has a family emergency, so he's not going to be here, and we need to find someone new. This person got stuck in India and isn't allowed back until their visa makes it off some magical stack. We had that happen. It was interesting. He's like, it's sitting on a desk somewhere in India. I hope it gets through soon. It's like, I do too. And like these are really the important problems you need to solve. And then they cause you to update the project plan. But that shouldn't be where your time is spent. Your time needs to be spent on the real project issues. So my goal here today is to not only give you an overview of Project 2010, but to help give you some tips and tricks. So when you have those real problems, you have more time to handle those and less time actually updating your schedule. I guess you could say my goal is to minimize your time in the project client a little, which I hate saying is my goal because, you know, I've grown up on the project client. I love it, but I want you guys to be getting the most out of work. So having said that, today we'll talk about the new features in Project 2010. We'll do the tips and tricks. I mean, the project's been out for 2 and some years. I can't quite remember the exact date. So we've gotten a lot of feedback from people who have moved to 2010, and I'll share that feedback with you and share some of the, okay, now that you're using this feature, here's the things you need to know. Here's the most common questions I get asked. We'll talk about the SKUs. So for people who aren't on Project 2010 and are thinking about moving, we'll talk about the difference between Project Standard and Project Professional. We'll talk about what you need to know if you are upgrading to Project 2010. And finally, I'll save a bunch of time at the end for questions. So I would ask you, unless you can't hear me or something like that, to save your questions for the end, and I promise I'll save a bunch of time for that. So speaking of questions, I have a couple questions for you guys. So who is actually using Project 2010 today? Ooh, lots of hands. Awesome. Who's using it with SharePoint? Lots more hands. And who's using it with Project Server? And then who in the room is very new to 2010, might know there's a timeline view because Keshav just showed it in the keynote, but isn't really that overall familiar? Okay, so a couple hands. So let's get started. So speaking of getting started, one other things. For the Project 2010, we had investments in 3 main areas. We wanted to make it easier for you to get started, easier for you to plan, and easier for you to report. So this is kind of how I'm going to segment my talk. So easier to get started, we realized that people don't start in a blank project plan and think about, what do I want to do today? No, like project planning starts in emails, maybe from your boss, maybe it's an Excel spreadsheet, and then you move it over to project when you decide you need to put some more structure around it. Maybe it's a SharePoint task list. Maybe it's a presentation that, you show the presentation, they're like, yeah, go forward, do a project off of that. So we realized that, and we've tried to make that easier. We've moved to the Fluent UI. So Fluent UI is a fancy name for the ribbon in the backstage that some Office apps went to in 2007, the rest went to in 2010. Basically, before Fluent UI, you could get into this state in project where you have tons of toolbars, you have your menus, and it's very chaotic, and the toolbars kind of move around on you. With the ribbon, we basically started with a pile of 900 commands. I actually had a Post-it note for each command. And we moved them around on boards as we were trying to organize them in the way that we felt would make the most sense to you. We did tons of usability studies to design this, and debated every command. I mean, I can tell you the story about why each command is anywhere if you really want to know, but I'll skip that for now. And then we have the contextual tab, which in this case is the Gantt chart tools, the purple one. And that is the commands that are contextual to that view. So that way, if you're in the calendar view, we're not going to be telling you about Gantt bar stuff. And then all your sharing, printing, publishing is in the backstage area. So that's what you get to when you click File. And this is the layout that the rest of Office uses too. I mean, the tabs are kind of different, but we have tried to stay as consistent as possible. So you don't have to, if you're switching back and forth from Excel and Project, you're not relearning it. So speaking of Excel, they have a grid, we have a grid, they're in Office, we're in Office. We want to be consistent, and we have each release we try to get more and more consistent. So a couple things we've added this release is the add new column, and I'll show this all in demos too. The add new column, so in Excel, if I want to add some information, I just start typing. Now in Project, you can just start typing. We have text wrapping just to make it easier when you have those really long task names. Filter improvements. This is one of my favorite features in Excel and now in Project. You get it in Excel if you do a table, and I think it's, I love it. And we have it in Project now, and it's great when you're working with a project that has some size to it, and you can really narrow down and focus in on what you want. We have autocomplete. This is especially great for the resource names column. So if you don't know how to spell resource names, you can just start typing, and it autocompletes for you instead of having, like I said, my manager is Keshav. I won't try to pronounce his last name. I definitely won't try to spell it. I don't even have to spell it anymore. I can just type K-E, and it will autocomplete in my schedules when I assign him work, which he normally doesn't let me do. And then we have row and column highlighting just to help you in the grid. And then finally, with easier to get started, we've improved copy-paste. And when we tell people this, they're like, oh, you mean Control-C, Control-V? You made it fancier, and they kind of mock us. But then once we tell them what we did, they get a little more excited. So one of the things, if you're using a previous release of Project, you'll notice when you copy in like a bolded list, we don't maintain that hierarchy. And you have to recreate the hierarchy, which is not a huge deal normally, but it's a pain. So we thought we could make that better. So now we maintain that hierarchy, and we'll maintain formatting. So if you notice, in the email, there's a red task that will come in as red text. And then normally you come into Project, but you have to share it with people who aren't always in Project. So we let you paste it then back into Word or PowerPoint or whatever app is your choice. And we'll paste it as a table. You'll get the column headers, maintain the hierarchy. So let's see this in action. So here's Project, but once again, we don't start in Project, so I'm not going to either. Say this is an email, but it's the same as being in Word. Says, hey, we want to do another Project conference. This one seems to be going so far good. And they're like, we need to do planning registration sessions. And this is clearly not enough to plan a conference. So I'm going to need to pull it into Project and do some more thinking. So I'm going to copy that. Paste it, and you'll see my hierarchy is maintained, and my task that was red is still red. We support this with Word and Outlook. If you want to come through PowerPoint, you can, but it will get a little weird, which I'll show you what I mean. So if I go directly from PowerPoint, I'm going to get my bullets. So you have two options. You can turn off bullets by just unclicking bullets, copy, paste, and then it comes in really big because PowerPoint uses a much bigger default text than us because they're a presentation app and we're an editing app. So I can paste it. I can choose to match destination formatting, and there I go. Or I have the alternative of going through Word, which is always if you're trying to post from maybe some third-party app, whatever you're using, if you go through Word, you can normally get it into Project correctly. So I'll show you that real quick. So add back my bullets. And there, so same thing, so basically all the Office apps have a different way how they store bolded lists on copy-paste, and we went with the one that was most popular, which is Word, because it's used by Outlook. So that's why some of the other ones will have a little awkwardness to them. But anyways, I have my project plan in here, and now I can start adding a lot more details to it, because clearly this isn't enough. So one thing in Project 2010, when we moved to the ribbon, we really looked at what little features could we add to just make things easier and more, things you already are doing today, but we'll just put them at your fingertips. So one thing we have is these insert commands in the ribbon. So I can quickly insert a milestone. I can say planning complete. I won't put any dates on it yet because I don't know when I'm going to be done. For the night events, let's see, decide a theme. Research places. Choose a location, and then we'll do some around food because, personally, pretty important part of the evening event, I think. So decide a menu tasting, make sure it's good. Wine tasting, any volunteers for this one? So I have a couple tasks now, and these are all very food related, so I should probably put those together. So now I can just select them and choose Insert Summary Task, and it makes a summary task of those tasks, and then subtasks, of those tasks, and gives me a summary task. So now, food tasks, and I can assign myself to those because I feel like I have expertise there. And then, I can go through, indent these. I keep adding details as I want to. And then, let's see, my event, we'll say we're going to hold this in October, so we'll hold it at the beginning of the month. And then we're going to have a 3-day conference again, and my post-event is going to have to come after my event, so we'll do that. And then I can scroll to these, see where they are. I can view the entire project to just start getting a map of this as I continue to add in dates. And then since I'm probably going to start planning my registration first, I can zoom back in over here. So speaking of zoom entire project, this is one of those commands, at least when I'm doing my project management, because on the project team, we use project to manage our future releases. So we try to use the product as much as we can, which is kind of great because when you don't like a feature, you know exactly who owns that feature to go yell at. But anyways, so I've used View Entire Project a lot. And I was talking about the ribbon and how we tried to lay it out in the way that we felt made the most sense. But everybody has different opinions. Everybody uses different features. So one of the nice things is you can customize it. And one of the easiest ways to customize it is to customize your quick access toolbar, which is this up in the upper left-hand corner. It's also called the QAT. To customize it, I just really easily right-click commands to say add to the quick access toolbar. And now it's always there, so even if I'm on the task tab, I can keep using it. And one of the nice things is if I click Alt, I get numbers up there. So now Alt 4, no matter what tab I'm in, no matter what project I'm in, will always zoom entire project for me. So if you have a favorite command, I definitely recommend you adding it there. And this works across all of Office. Like we do tons of Word documents and reviewing, so I always have the comment commands up there. And like every Word I have, because we have multiple machines, I have customized this way. So speaking of tips and tricks and time savers, so I said, you can do Alt 4 and it will zoom entire project now, which I'm already zoomed that way. But who's a keyboard shortcut user? Okay, look around. These are smart people. Keyboard shortcuts will save you so much time. And whatever app you use the most, especially our test team, they live by them. If you ever break a keyboard shortcut, they will come and kill you. So like Alt-Shift-Right, Alt-Shift-Left, and then Out-Dent. So Alt-Shift, there, you can do that. You can link Control F2. If you want to learn them all, you just hover on the command, and if there is a shortcut key for it, it will tell you it in this super tooltip. Also, if you just search Project 2010 keyboard shortcuts, you'll find our help article on them. And one other thing while I'm talking about ribbon keyboard shortcuts, if you are a new person to a ribbon, and this goes for any of the Office apps too, we have the ribbon guide. So basically, shows me 2007, and I can choose any command. So let's say copy picture, because that was a hard one at first for people. It will take me to Project 2010 and will show me exactly where it is in the ribbon. And this we have for all the Office apps. If you want to find it, just search Project 2010 ribbon guide. And I recommend Bing. But it was the first result when I searched last night. So anyways, back to my project plan. So I feel like getting some good data here. But there's a couple things like, I'm back in the corporate office in Redmond, and we're planning this conference in who knows what city. But there's some things I can do from Redmond, and there's some things I have to do from the city. So I want to start indicating those in my thing. So research places, well, I'm going to want to go to the places. So we'll say that's on location. Menu tasting, I kind of need to be there. Wine tasting, I need to be there for. And notice I didn't declare a custom field or anything. I just started typing. And that's what I was talking about, the add new column. It's the last column in your view. And you can just type into it, and it will add that column. And I can later go in and place I need to be, retitle it. And just as I would declare a custom field in the custom field dialog. If you still need to do a fancy custom field like formula, graphical indicator, you need to go through custom field dialog. But if you just want a field that holds some data, just start typing. This also works on the other kinds of fields. So if I start typing numbers, it will assume you want a number custom field. If I'm like, no, those are actually costs, I'm just too lazy to type a $, I can change the data type to cost, and now it's a cost custom field. So that saves a lot of time. Especially if you're pasting in from other apps, you can quickly delete the columns you don't need and then just add the columns. So that way you have the same layout structure as like your Excel spreadsheet you're coming from. So now I have my night events. I think this is looking good. So I want to get some feedback on this. So I can easily copy this. And then again, pretend I'm in Outlook. I didn't want to have my email client up as I was doing this. And I paste it as a table. I get my tasks names, I get my table headers, I get my hierarchy. So it's a very readable format. One tip here is if you paste, choose merge formatting, that's a little better because then if I do want to change my table style, it will fill it in, where if you don't do that, your table headers sometimes look really weird. So that's what I always do because I always like playing with these. So one of the other things I mentioned was the text wrapping. And I have shorter names because I was typing them and didn't want to put it through. But you can see if I resize the column a little bit, they will automatically wrap. If I make it big enough, it will unwrap itself. One of the questions we get a lot is people will come in here. And to turn it on and off, you just right-click the column header and say wrap text. We wrap a couple columns by default. You can choose more if you want to. If I choose to not wrap it, they won't unwrap themselves. You have a couple options. You can just make it bigger, but that will make your tasks row still big. So the best way is just to click the top corner up there. And then this works just like Excel. I can resize one row, and it will resize all the rows to be that size. So just quickly gets your project looking good again, if that's what you want to do. So then the other feature I mentioned was autofilter. So I'm going to switch to another project plan, which has a little more data in it. So autofilter, as I said, lets you quickly filter things out. So this is my start column, and you can see I can filter out dates. So I can say I don't want to see anything in May, and I only have my June task in here. Or I can be a little smarter, so I don't have any tasks this month. So I can say this year, and all my tasks are in 2011, which is why you don't see anything. One thing to know here, so let me just do a random filtering, is we tell you down in your status bar, see where I'm hovering down there, which columns you're filtered on. So if you ever auto-filter and then hide a column, and that was the column you're filtered on, you can easily find out what you did by looking in the bottom corner. And then to remove them, you can either just, come here and select all, or if I go to the View tab, Filters, Clear Filter, that will clear everything. And we also tell you in the status bar when you're filtered. We have definitely gotten files from customers before being my tasks are missing. They're not missing, they were filtered. Check your status bar, it will tell you what's going on. And if you are just not seeing tasks, I always recommend clear all filters first, and it might just been a filter got stuck on, or you stayed with a filter, you went on vacation, you came back, you didn't remember what you were doing. Another nice thing about autofilter is we tried to be smart about what we did. We have sorting, which is the same as Excel. We have the autofilters. But we're like, we have a grouping feature in Project. And I think it's a great feature because it gives you roll-ups and lets you really analyze your data. So we decided to add that to our autofilter too. So I can just one-click, group on this field, turn it off. Or what I like a little better is I can group and I can say start dates by month. So you can easily put in some intervals too. But let me group by resource name. So now notice these are roll-ups here, so I'm going to actually filter out my blank tasks because those are, I don't care about them right now. And I can see, Amy has 192 hours, Anne has 56, etc. And let's say I just care about the risky work they have to do. So I can come in here and say risky is yes, and that was a custom field I had defined. And notice that my group by headers updated with what's left. So this is a great feature if you want to quickly analyze how your work falls into different buckets. Like we work in work hours. Like that's our budget. We're given a certain amount of work for features, and we have to always make sure we fit. So this is what I constantly am doing. So huge time saver. And then, again, I can quickly do clear filter to get everything back. So then coming back to the deck. So that was easier to get started. And we'll come back to some of these features as we go. I'm going to try to show how they all keep building on each other. But we're going to move into easier to plan. So one thing we hear from people a lot is when they're talking about their project plans is, project's very smart, and it tries to help you out a lot. But sometimes it gets in your way, and you just want to tell the thing to stop. So we added something called user-controlled scheduling, which is exactly that. It will give you more control over your schedule. But we're not going to throw you in the deep end and be like, you wanted control, you have it, deal. But we're going to warn you when things aren't going on. It's like, hey, you said these were linked. We're not moving it, but maybe you should. Another thing, we wanted to make it more flexible for you. So we know lots of times, everybody in the beginning has this grand vision of what they can do. And then as reality sets in and, things start to go over, you realize you have to make cuts to fit. But in our back of our mind, we're always hopeful that we'll fit those tasks back in. So instead of making you delete those, we have a new feature called inactive task, which lets you essentially delete them from the project plan, but they'll still be there in case the miracle happens and you can bring the task back. We have a new view called the Team Planner, which is kind of resource Gantt chart, and you saw Keshav demoing that in the keynote. And then if you're familiar with the task drivers feature we added in Project 2007, we now have something called the Task Inspector. So it not only tells you what's driving the task, why it's starting when it is, but why any other factors affecting it. So user-controlled scheduling, if you hadn't noticed in my plan before I had a bunch of tasks with blank dates, that would have never happened in 2007. It made you put in dates. We no longer do that because, when I was figuring out the next project conference, I don't have dates yet. I'm thinking about food planning and stuff. I don't want to worry about the dates right now. So we don't make you put those in. Oops. And also I mentioned the user-controlled tasks. So we'll go through all the types. I have manually scheduled tasks, which those are the teal ones with the black brackets. And basically, they won't move unless you explicitly tell them to. So in this case, even if task 2 slips out a couple more days, task 3 won't move. We have a top-down summary. So I can say, okay, I have 3 weeks for this phase. And now as I add my task, I can see how they fill up those 3 weeks. I have placeholder tasks, so they can either be blank or they can have plain text to them, TBD, or I need to ask Bob to figure out what's going on here. Bob is one of our favorite resources because he has such a short name. He does a lot of work. And then we have inactive tasks. So as I mentioned, I don't have time for this task right now, but I don't want to remove it. I might have added some custom fields to it. I might have some good notes on this, and I want those to still be there in case I can bring this task back. And this is a great a great feature for budgeting. When you have a big budget, you're trying to meet it. You're like, okay, what if I don't do this, but I do this? Okay, now what if I do that and not this? How can I make it all fit? So Team Planner, as I mentioned, is kind of a resource Gantt chart. So those are my resources in the left column, and then those are all the tasks they're assigned to. We actually built a project plan of the conference because we have about 10 people here from the development team, and we wanted to make sure we were all in different sessions. So I have all the sessions in here, and we have resources, and we were moving around to debate who goes to what session. And it was actually a very good view for that. The other thing I think this view is great for is it's just a very good visualization. So we actually, on project team, we have our coding milestones where we're using detailed project plans. And then we have in between where we're doing more stabilization work. And then those we're not doing a project plan. We manage, we have another database for issue tracking. But we want to know like what areas are people working on. So we built views, and we'll go in Team Planner, and we'll put this up in the leads meeting, and we'll see like, okay, this is where all the developers on our team are working. This is where all the testers are working. Do we feel like we have a good mix? So it's a great visualization for that. And you can do a lot more than just, project planning as you think about it. And then finally, the task inspector. As I said, it helps you understand why your task is starting when it is, what factors could be affecting it, and what changes you might want to make to the task so it fits better in your plan and you have a more realistic plan. Okay, so let's switch to a demo. So I'm going to switch back to my initial event plan. And as I mentioned before, we have some tasks without dates, some with freeform dates. I can easily, if I scroll down, you'll see I have a bunch more at the bottom I haven't figured out because those are happening a lot later and I just haven't gotten to them. One thing, you can filter on which ones don't have dates. So this is as you are adding information in, you'll want all your tasks to eventually have dates because that's probably the only way they're going to happen. So we have a filter called Task Without Dates. And that will show you any task that doesn't have a date or if it has free-form text, because we don't count free-form text as a date because, it's not a date in the actual sense. So just one thing as you're getting more into the executing to make sure you do. So now let's see. I got some information on these. So task 4 we said is going to take 3 days, and task 7 is going to take 3 days. And notice as I made those changes how you saw some red coming up in the project plan. So as I said before with top-down summaries, I typed in that it was going to take 12 days. It's actually going to take 13. I have a couple options here. I can change this summary task to be auto-scheduled, and it means it'll just work as it does today, automatically roll up and adjust itself. I can extend it out a day and just be like, okay, 13 days it is, 13 days. Or I can say, it's going to take 12 days, but we have exception for one thing to go past. And we don't want everything to be red because of this one thing. We don't want to adjust everything because of this. We just want to say, okay, I've talked to my boss. We're going to make an exception. So I can right-click on this, and I can just say ignore it. Like, we know about it. I've managed it. Don't keep telling me. I don't want it looking red when I show my boss this, etc. Now this one also is red and has like kind of the dotted line around it because as you see here, I said this task should start after the other one, and it's not. So again, I have a couple options to fix that. I can do right-click again and click Respect Links, which means just that. It's going to respect the link one time, so it will move out. But then if I change this task again, it doesn't keep moving out. It's just a one-time thing. Or I can look at this in Task Inspector. To see, it may need to delay it by 2 hours. I can respect the link. I can auto-schedule it. Or I can ignore it if it's something that, it doesn't really have a link. I want to keep the link in the schedule, but I don't want it to be respected. So I'm going to say respect links. So another few things. By default, we show you warnings. We don't show you suggestions because they kind of clutter up the UI, but you can turn them on if you want to. So I turned on suggestions. That was on the inspect menu. And you'll see some green squigglies now. So we show warnings when it's logic that could affect your project finish date, and it's things where we feel like there's more things. It's a stronger message to you. It's like, you told us there was a predecessor here. We're not respecting it. We really feel like we should. We show you suggestions when it's things like, hey, like this task looks like it could start earlier. Maybe you want to do that. So if I come here, you'll notice this task is just for some reason starting on the second day of the project. Why can't it start on the first day? And I agree, it probably should start on the first day. So I can just through Task Inspector say change dates, and that one moves over. And then if you have a lot of manually scheduled tasks, this normally has a cascading effect, and you'll have to go through. Or at some point, what we've seen a lot of people do is they start with manually scheduled tasks when they're doing that high-level planning, and then once they get into executing, they'll switch a lot of them to be auto-scheduled, so that way as you're pulling actuals in and everything, the tasks just update as they naturally would. And then one other thing, say you had ignored a bunch of warnings because you had the exceptions for them, whatever, you don't want to see the red. but maybe you want to bring them back because you forget what you did, you can always come to the inspect dropdown and say show ignored problems, and that red that I had ignored earlier comes back. A couple other tips. So one thing, after we added the auto manually scheduled task, we realized that when you're showing this in maybe a team meeting, the first questions you get when anything is different is, why is my task teal and his task is blue? And team members don't need to worry about that. It doesn't matter from their perspective. So we added some Gantt chart styles to help you out with that. Some of them are just fun colors. So if we added 32-bit color in 2010. Prior to that, we only had 12 colors, I want to say. So now we have them all. We have more actually than the eye can detect. So you can change that just if you want to have some fun. But we added these presentation styles, and they make all the tasks look the same color. So if you're presenting to a team meeting, if you're doing screenshots for a PowerPoint deck, recommend you go to the presentation styles where everything's one color, so you don't have to spend the meeting explaining things that aren't what you actually want people to focus on. So let me set that back. And then one other thing we added this release, well, not one other, there's a lot more, is move tasks. So when you're using manually scheduled tasks, they stay in place and they don't move. But sometimes you want them to move. And we added a couple commands just to make that a lot easier. So, oh, this has got slipped to next week, push that out 4 weeks, custom. Some we really like are if should you select all earlier, you do that and then say move incomplete parts to status date. So the status date, everyone hopefully knows, is the date that you set to show your task is up to date through. So if we do our status updates every Friday, I would set it to last Friday and say my project plan is current as of last Friday. If you have incomplete work in the past, unless your time machine is working, it's not going to get done. You need to move it to the current date. And same if you have completed parts in the future, they probably didn't get done in the future, so you want to move them back just to keep your project plan up to date. So it's another just little feature that really helps you quickly adjust your project. And then the last one is just when resources are available. So if I had resource assignments here, I could use that and it would jump to the next spot. Bob was available on his calendar. Excuse me. So one of the other things, whenever we show user-controlled scheduling, we always have some people who are like, I want waterfall. I do not want any of these tasks getting in my way. I don't want to accidentally use one. I don't want to see their icons. So we have a feature for you. So if you come to the mode dropdown, this will affect how new tasks are created. So if I set it to auto-scheduled and I insert a new task, notice it came in as auto-scheduled and not manually scheduled. I can do that as say, I started manually scheduled, but I'm in the execution phase, so I want everything auto-scheduled. Or if you're the person who, I never want to use this feature, sorry, great idea, people, but not for me. I can go to the File menu, Options, and then if I go to the Schedule tab, and there's new task created, I can set this to auto-scheduled, and then I can set for all new projects. So basically, any new project I create on this machine will now have whoops, I said it the wrong way, auto-scheduled task by default. And that's also something stored in the registry. So if you're in more of an IT position and you want to roll out project for a department and you want certain settings, that way you can set that through the registry the same way you do for the rest of Office. There's a tool for that, and I'm completely blanking on it, but there is a way to do that. Okay, so now I have my project plan pretty good. I probably need some resources to do this work. And I've already added some resources to my plan. I gave Bob a break, but I chose a bunch of other short names because those always look better. We had a designer from Mexico who was always making fun of us for our short little American names, she called them, that we would use in our demos. So time to add. Notice we now have a drop down here with checkboxes, so I can easily assign multiple tasks to people. Or as I said before, we have autocomplete, so I can just start typing. I can do it here, and say I knew those tasks should go to those people, so I just did it quickly that way. Or I can switch over to my team planner view, scroll to the current ones, and I already have a conflict, so I can move this task here. I can right-click and say reassign to also, so I think Mary has some time. Or just drag up. It depends on whatever you think is easier. This bar does move, so move it up here and just less space to drag. One of the common questions we get about the team planner view is that people want to put it with other views so they can get more information. I have it with the timeline right now, which I'll hide for a minute. And we do show you some task information through when you hover. So I can say like, start, finish date, duration, percent complete work, and even the task path, so I can see what summary task this falls under. So if I have a lot of tasks that are called the same thing, that helps there. But if you want more information, you can split it. So if I go to the View tab and I click Details, that will add the Details pane here, and then change that to say either the task form or the task sheet. It will provide different information about the tasks as I click on them. So it just helps give me some of that additional information. There's also, I could put the resource sheet down here, because one of the common questions we get too is how do I add additional columns to the team planner view? That's currently not supported. So by splitting the view and adding a secondary view that complements the team planner, you can get that additional information you might need. Then one other feature, which I'll switch to this plan to show, is, let me ungroup. And see how this plan doesn't have the most creative names. I have feature 1, feature 2, and I have UI work, backend work. Like all the tasks kind of have the same names. So when I come over to Team Planner, it's not that useful, because I'm like, oh, they're working on UI work. I wonder what that is. I have an option of doing a roll-up. So instead of showing the actual task names, I can roll it up to a different outline level, and now I can see which codings. Actually, I rolled up one too far. Okay, I can roll up to the other outline level. You can choose whichever one you want. And now I can see which actual features people are working on. So it just provides me a little higher information. You can use this too, as we're saying, is it good for meetings to show where people are working? Maybe they don't need to see the actual task names. You just want to see the feature names, or however you are organizing your task in your project. One of the things you'll notice is this plan is a little more colorful. So we'll show black tasks are ones that are late, again, looking off your status date. Red is showing me where my people are over allocated. And then I can also color a task here, just like you can set colors in the Gantt chart. So say I want to talk about this at my meeting I'm about to have, so I'm going to make it, whoops, I meant to make it dark orange because that looks bad. Darker orange. And this, this way it highlights it so it's easier for me to talk about. Okay, so finally we talked about inactive tasks. I'm going to come back to this project plan. And notice I have feature 4, option A, and option B. Well, I'm trying to still figure out which one I have budget for, because right now I'm over budget. Like if you see my work hours, I have 1753, and we'll say that's too many. And I don't want to do feature 4 twice. I want to do it once. But I just have 2 options. We'll say the B part is a little more work because it's the better way to do it, but I'm not sure if I can fit it in. So I can easily tell by inactivating one of them. I'm still like, okay, I have 1581 if I do the option I really want. Or down to 1561 if I do the option that's not quite as good. You guys demand the best from us, so we're going to do the better option. So I'll inactivate the one I don't want to. But that information is all here. So that way, if the earlier tasks start to fall behind, I can still switch up and go with the other option if I want to. As I mentioned earlier, we used this feature a ton when we were doing our project planning. One thing to note is you can't inactivate a task that has actuals on it. We made that as a design decision because, say Bob's 20% done, I inactivate it, and I start up in 2 months. He might not still be 20% done. I mean, it depends on the task, but a lot of times that work just doesn't transfer over. You might need to do new things. I mean, who knows? So we don't let you inactivate tasks with actuals. You'll have to remove them. What we recommend to people who want to kind of keep that data around is just add a task note, because that will stay around. And then when I reactivate it in the future, I can just transfer the data from the note back into the project. So now let's switch back to the demo, or the presentation. So that's easier to plan. So last one is easier to report. So we added a timeline view. I think that's the one that gets the most traction around Project 2010. It's had a very viral effect in the Office organization, even at Microsoft. We see it was great when we were doing the 2010 release because we're using the latest builds constantly. So we had timelines, but then we started seeing random teams that we don't really talk to using timelines, and that's when we're like, oh, we've made it. Actually, one team had, you know how you can do iron-on transfers onto T-shirts where you print it and like iron on a shirt? They had timelines on their shirt for the release drivers. So the release drivers would be like, you want to know the dates? Here are the dates. So we really liked that one. For those of you who are working with SharePoint, we now have a feature that synchronizes tasks with SharePoint. So if you don't have Project Server, but you still want to have the collaborative and your team members knowing what's going on without you emailing it to them, you can use that. And finally, we added visual reports in 2007. And in 2010, we made some improvements to them. So timeline view is just a quick way to summarize your project plans, to send out that high-level view to executives, team members, people who don't care about Gantt charts at all. You can send them the timeline view. And it shares great with other Office apps, as Keshav showed in his demo. To say synchronize with SharePoint task list, so you can see here, I have my task list in project. I go through the backstage, I say sync with task list, and now they're all showing up in SharePoint, and my team members can come in and see them and edit them and stuff. And then I can pull that information back into project. And then finally, visual reports. The two big improvements we have is support for assignment custom fields. So the assignment cubes are your best cubes because they have resources and task data. We previously didn't let you have custom fields to them. We've now added support for that. And we have longer field names. I think previously they were 23 character limit, and now we're like 60s or something, like enough that you should never hit it. So we'll show you those demos. So now it kind of hurt me in this demo the entire time because I didn't have a timeline in any of my project plans, but I didn't want to really put one in until I built one with you guys. So I had to refrain. It was hard. So now to add tasks to a timeline, there's a couple ways to do it. You can right-click, add a timeline. There's a command on the ribbon. Or what I think is one of the easiest ways, if you just click the timeline and go existing task. These are all the tasks that are in your project plan, and I can easily just click them. I know I want these. Let's give a milestone. So I've added them all. I can move some tasks up if I want to make it look a little better. One thing, if you're working with the timeline a lot, customizing it, the pan and zoom control is great for navigating your Gantt chart, and you can zoom in, out, etc. But it kind of gets in your way when you're formatting, so I always just remove it by unchecking pan and zoom, and then you can easily always add it back later when you need it. So let's make this look a little nicer. Do some colors. I can change my date format if I want. By default, we copy the same one you're using in project in general. So if you have a long date format that maybe includes time or just spells out months names, you'll probably, for the timeline view, want to set it to be something shorter as your timeline starts to get more filled up with data. You can set multiple text lines. So if you have longer task names, you can set it to be 2 lines, or if you just like the look, put it back to 1. So now I have my timeline. I think it looks pretty good. I want to share it with my team. So I have a couple options for how to copy paste, and this is actually where I get most of the questions around timeline. So initially, we just had a copy timeline button, and we were finding people had these huge resolutions, and they'd copy a timeline this big and put it into Outlook mail, and that just doesn't work. I mean, it's too big for the mail. So we added copy for email, copy for presentation. All we're doing is behind the scenes, pretending that you have project about this big instead of this big, and we're pasting it at that size. It's not doing anything super fancy. It was kind of entertaining in the forums when someone was saying what they thought it was doing, and it was much fancier than what the feature actually did. But just know that's what it's doing. So if you have a really congested timeline, don't use those features because it'll probably size it down, and then your tasks will all start to overlap each other. So in that case, you would want to just size your screen down to something that looks good, and then you can drag these around and adjust them, and then copy full size, because full size is just however big your window is at that time. So I'm going to do that. Paste it in, and then these are all pasted in as individual objects. So I can come in and update them to match the colors of my PowerPoint theme. You can add reflection. You can add animations, as Keshav showed, et cetera. I mean, make it look fancy. It's PowerPoint at this point, so anything you can do in PowerPoint, like, this is the one I want people looking at, so I draw a big arrow to it, whatever. So some other common questions are that people want to be able to format the time scale. Unfortunately for the timeline, we don't let you format the time scale because it throws off Zoom in a really weird way, and just when, we had a lot of things we could do with the timeline, we had to choose a limited amount of features. It wasn't one of the things we got to. So one of the workarounds is you can create tasks that actually are your time scale. So I just have a task in here for each week. I added them to my timeline, and then I have the date format showing how I want. And I could put those on the timeline or above, however I think looks best. And I've told that to some people, and they kind of look at me like I'm crazy. But honestly, it doesn't take long to add this task. So if you want to do it at the month level, it's not that time consuming. And you do it once, and then you always have it there. Another question I get asked a lot on the timeline is, when you're doing initial planning, you don't want to show dates because you might not have dates. You're more saying, this is how I think the project's going to progress. When do you want to do it? So for that, we can turn off dates really easily by coming to the date format dropdown, unchecking task dates, unchecking the time scale, and then I'm going to make the text 2 lines just because I like it better. And now I have a timeline without dates. For those of you who are paying attention, we do have 2 dates on the side. But when I copy it into PowerPoint or Outlook or wherever, I can easily delete those 2 little text boxes. And then the last question we get is, people want to be able to set the timeline to only start and finish at dates that are different from their project plan. Another thing we really want to support but didn't get to, but you can kind of fake it. So say I'm just working on this define event area, weeks 1 and 2. So I'm going to add some more tasks to the project for that. And it's going to get a little cluttered. I'm going to move them around. Dragging down. That's a little too much. And now, again, if I want to show just this part with my team members, if I do copy timeline up here, I'm going to get the entire timeline. And it's going to be massive because I'm zoomed in right now. This isn't what I want to do. So if I just click and drag, I can create a box and see everything in orange is going to be in my selection. Just do Control-C. Come over, and now I have just the part of the project schedule that I wanted to share in here. So that one gets asked about a lot. I showed one of our office coordinators that the other day, and he said, finally. He's trying to figure out how to do that. So next, to show you visual reports, come over to not this project, this one. Actually, no. Sorry, I forgot which plan I wanted. This one we wanted. Okay, I also have something in here, a custom field called approval. And basically, I'm just using this to say, does the person who does this task at the end, do they need approval from someone? I have some sets yes and no. And I want to do a report that has this field in it. So I can go to my project tab, go to visual reports. And then for those of you not familiar with visual reports, Amruta in the back will be doing a session on client reporting today, about 3 or so. And she'll be going into it a lot more in depth. So if you want to learn more about that and just reporting the client in general, highly encourage you to attend. She's waving. But we have a bunch of templates just to help you out. The templates aren't super detailed. They're just to get you past the blank screen, and then you can customize them to meet your needs. I'm going to create a new one, though. And I said, our assignment cubes, these are cubes. It's just how the data is packaged. Now have custom fields, so I'm going to build one off the assignment summary. And we now have custom fields, so I'm going to add my approval one. Click OK, and my report will be built in Excel. For those of you that haven't, wow, that's not good. Okay, I did this presentation, I don't know how many times, and never got that. Everybody look over there. Let me come back. Okay, we'll try that one more time. You know, some features just have stage fright. Okay. So last time I presented at the project conference, the fire alarm went off in the middle. If anyone was here in 2009, remember we had to evacuate the building. It was 110 degrees out. But I'm like, we now are joking, like, hey, if anything goes wrong in the presentations again, like just pull the fire alarm, you know, it happened once, you can do it again. So I have my report in Excel. And now I have a couple things I could do. I could just build one quickly with my resources to show like remaining work versus actual work. And this is just a pivot table in Excel. If you're not familiar with pivot tables, just start clicking around. Honestly, that's the easiest way to learn them. There are Excel help topics that will help you too, but like I didn't know them, and then I just started clicking around and figured it out. So, and that's what the templates we ship will help you with too. And I can insert a chart, and I can easily see, you know, how much work each resource has versus remaining work. Notice this data isn't live connected, so if I go back to my project plan and make an update, it's not going to be reflected immediately in this chart. I'd have to build a new report. But that's not that exciting report. I want to show you guys something a little more exciting. You seem like a good audience. You deserve it. So we're going to show task and remaining work. So this is the remaining work for all the tasks in my project. You're probably like, that's not that exciting. You just showed us this with resources. Add my pivot chart back. You can see, you know, that's how much task. I added that custom field, though, so I want to start using that. And I can now see how much for each summary, how much approval work I need versus non-approval work. Maybe I need to show this to the approvers to be like, hey, this is how much left you have to approve. You know, you can use it how you want. But another thing Excel added in 2010 are called slicers. So I can add those for my resources. Just say, okay, it's saying something that doesn't apply to our kind of charts. And then as I select a resource, the data updates to be filtered just for that resource. It's a pretty cool feature. It works with pivot tables. So if you're just doing a pivot table report in Excel off who knows what data, you can use it, and it's very handy for when you're showing reports to people to do some analysis. But now I can see, you know, each resource, how much work they have remaining that has been approved and not approved, or that will need approval or doesn't need approval. And then finally, I mentioned syncing with SharePoint task. So you can either do this building the project plan and project and syncing up to SharePoint, or you can start in SharePoint and sync it down. I'm going to start in SharePoint. Notice one thing with SharePoint task lists we get a lot of feedback on is you can't see summary tasks and subtasks in the same view. They do folders more, so if I drill into phase one, you can see I have a bunch of tasks under there. But let me go up. So now if I come to the list tab and I say open schedule. Oh, it doesn't work if you have a dialog up. This is just a security warning. Yes, I trust the source. And you can see all my tasks have come in from SharePoint. And I can now update them here just like I would work in project on anything. So respect the link. This do more task, I'm going to do more for 10 days, not 1 day. Update this to be auto-scheduled. By default, they'll all come in manually scheduled when you're starting from SharePoint because, I mean, SharePoint doesn't have a scheduling engine around it, so they are very manually scheduled over there. But once they're in project, you can auto-schedule them. And then each time you sync the data in, the task will be auto-scheduled. Like they still won't be in SharePoint, but you'll sync it into project. And then when you sync it back up, the dates will get updated and reflect, you know, the latest project, which I'll show you now. So I updated that to 10 days, so remember that. And then also, I come to my backstage, and I can see this was open from this task list, and it's already set up for the sync. But I want to update a little. By default, we only sync name, start, finish, percent complete, resource names, and predecessors. You can add more fields here if you would like. So I want to sync the work field just so people know how much work I'm expecting them to do on the task. So add that, and then click sync. And if I have any conflicts, it will bring that up. The warning I just went over quick is we associate one project file with each SharePoint task list. I've been demoing off this task list all morning, so mine has like 8 MPPs associated with it, so I've now changed it to be this last one. So I made these updates. If I come back to SharePoint and refresh the page, you'll see my second summary here. This one, remember, was 1 day. It's now updated to 10 days based on my change. One thing you'll note, I said to sync the work field, and it's not showing up. It's because I need to add it to my view. So, just how SharePoint, you do lots of fields, add them to views. But I can quickly modify my view. And there's my work field. Check it, and then if I scroll all the way over, you'll see I have 16 hours of work in my first phase because that's the only phase I had task assigned to. And now just to prove the point that things come both ways, I'm in here, and let's say some works happen. So this task is 100% complete, and this one's 75. Whoops. I can do that there, and then if I come back to my project plan, click sync, we'll pull that down in. So see, that one got marked off, actually. Make it more dramatic, I'll show you the percent complete field. You see I have a 100% complete task and a 75% complete task. And then say I had been editing here where someone else was editing on the server, and I clicked sync, and we had, like, I said it was 50%, they said it was 75%. I'll get a conflict dialog, and then I can choose which one I actually want to go with. So now if you have a new project plan, you can sync them up, as I mentioned. I'll just show you that real quick. So I have my task added. If I come to the backstage and click Save and Send, I can say sync with sync with task lists. I put in my URL. Put in just the main part of the URL, not the list.tasks.aspx part. That won't work. And then when you click Validate URL, all your task lists will show up, and I can either sync with an existing one, or I can just type a custom name and sync with that. One thing that also confuses people is we have sync with task lists, and below that we have save to SharePoint. Both are working with SharePoint. Sync with task list is just the task list part. Save to SharePoint is just the same as putting up. It is not, sorry. It's saving a project file up to a document library. So just the same as you would put like a Word document up in SharePoint so anyone could open it, you could put a project document up. With sync with task lists, you still will need to save the project file. So if I go back to this one, like say I have a bunch of more information I'm putting in here on stuff, I don't know, a lot more information. I'm saving baselines, I'm doing data analysis, whatever. I'm only syncing to SharePoint, those 5 fields I had checked. The rest of the data is just saving in the project plan. So I can just save this locally to my desktop. And then since we've created that connection to the SharePoint task list, each time I open this project plan, I can go to the backstage, click sync, and I'll get the latest changes in. So once you have a project established that's syncing, you don't want to go through the open schedule button in SharePoint because that will create a new project file, and you already have a project file. That's one thing that does, we get a lot of posts on the blog about I lost my project file connection and how to get it back because people do that. So let's switch back to the deck. So finally, going into which SKU is right for you. So as I mentioned earlier, we have Project Standard and Project Professional. In 2007 and before, the only difference between them was Professional would connect to the server and Standard wouldn't. In 2010, we've made that differentiation a little more. So Project Standard, you get all the core features. I mean, you have the Fluent UI, you have user-controlled scheduling, timeline view. And then in Project Professional, the additional features you get are working with Project Server, the Project Sync to SharePoint task list, the Team Planner view, and an active task. Those are all pro only. And you also get a CAL included with it if you're using it with Project Server. Project Server. And they all work on the same operating system, 32-bit, 64-bit. That's all the same. So now if you're still in an organization that's kind of split between a prior release and 2010, or if you're not on 2010 at all, you have a couple things you need to know. So one, if you're just working with MPP files. So MPP is our file format. That's how we call project files. It's project speak. We also call the project client WinProj because you can type start run WinProj and it will run welcome to the world of project. But if you're saving from Project 2010, you can save down to the 2007 file format, and then you can use that file format, that file in 2007. A couple things you need to know is inactive task will be removed. Manually scheduled tasks, they're not supported down there, so we have to do something. So with the freeform dates, if you had like Ask Bob, we'll change that into the date that we think makes the most sense based on where like the placeholder task in the project. For summaries, we'll add milestones that try to reflect the summary dates for manually scheduled summary task, but they won't be exact. And then colors. Project 2010, I said, has more colors than the eye can see. 2007 has 12. If you're using a lot of colors in 2010, it's not going to look good in 2007. I mean, there's just not enough colors to map to. Odds are most are going to look gray. Just then you know. You can, if you're using files between the two versions, like timeline view you can still use, team planner, auto filter, all the stuff that isn't a part of the schedule, but just how you view the schedule, those will still work fine. And it's just, if you create a timeline view, in 2010 you'll see it, in 2007 you won't. One thing to note, if 2007 can't open 2010 files, but you can install the Project 2010 trial. And even after the trial has expired, we'll still let you save 2010 files down to 2007, so you can use that as a converter. If you're in the project server world, Project 2010 does not work with Project Server 2007. It only works with Project Server 2010. You can use Project Professional 2007 with 2010 server in something we call compatibility mode. So in compatibility mode, both versions of the client will work, but you won't be able to use the features like inactive task and user-controlled scheduling because 2007 won't know what to do with them. Then once you uncheck compatibility mode, which is a one-way, one-time thing, you'll now be able to use all the features in 2010. So a couple related sessions. The top 3 are all from people on the project team. I think they're all in this room. So if you like the client overview, Pradeep will be doing a server overview right after lunch in this room. After that, Amruta will be doing project desktop reporting. Come and cheer her on. Tomorrow we'll have a session on tracking a project release using Project. That's going into how the project team uses Project and what we've learned from it and just how we do it. It's kind of interesting. And then the lower sessions are all just good project client sessions I saw. Sorry if you have a project client session and I didn't list it. I couldn't fit everything on the schedule, but look in your booklet. So then recap. What did we go over today? We said Project 2010 makes it easier to get started, easier to plan, and easier to report. I listed out the features, and I'll now open it up for questions, but I remembered one other thing I really wanted to show you guys. So give me a second, and I will switch back. So one other thing about the timeline view is we get a lot of questions is, can you have more than one? Because I have my timeline, I want to show my executives, but then as the same project, I want to have a timeline view to show my team members. Yes, we support that. The timeline view is just using the exact same view infrastructure as the rest of projects, so just how you can have multiple Gantt charts, you can have multiple timelines. So I'll just add a couple tasks to this one. Wow, that looks bad. And this is now my main timeline view I'm going to use. But if I want a new one, I can just easily come to it. My View tab, say More Views, New. And I want to make it type Timeline. And I should have given it a name, but it's now called View 1. So I have it here. And then the easiest way to add it is when I have the timeline checkbox, we'll list all your timeline views. So I can use View 1, and I can now customize this timeline for maybe the executives as opposed to the team members. So I knew I was going to forget one of my little tips and tricks, so I want to come back before doing questions. So now if anyone has questions.
Manually scheduled tasks. Once you stop putting assignments on, you stop posting work. What does Project do with those hours and that date?
So the question was, with manually scheduled tasks, after people stop putting hours on them and progressing them, do you mean if there's remaining work?
When people stop posting actual hours, the remaining work should start to decrease. What does Project
Okay, so question is manually scheduled task after people stop posting hours to them in actuals, there's remaining work. What does project do with that remaining work? It will stay scheduled exactly where it is. So like these tasks right here, they have remaining, whoops. These tasks right here have remaining work on them. That remaining work is going to stay in April, whenever, until the end of time, unless I go in there and do like the move task, move actuals to the status date.
So if the person doesn't start the task, say the schedule starts in January and it's supposed to go for the month. If they don't start that task, we're going to have work in the past. That work gets scheduled forward. It gets scheduled forward. It always has the same end date.
So the question is, if they don't start on January 1st, month-long task, and they start it later, does the finish date change? No, the finish date will shift out. So if I have a 1-month task and it's supposed to start in January, but then I have my first actual start date in February 1st, then it would end at the end of February.
So we'll keep the duration.
Yeah, the duration will be maintained. So question is, going from 2010 to 2007 when you downsave, do you notice anything changing with font styles and stuff? Well, colors will definitely change if you're using colors. I haven't seen the font. We did change the default font between 2007 and 2010, so it could be a very subtle thing. If you're seeing dramatic changes, you shouldn't. See me afterwards and I'll get the project plan from you and we can take a look. From 2003, well, from 2010, you can save down to 2003. If you go File, Save As, and then just choose your file format to 2003. We did initially have a couple of bugs on downsave I know we fixed, and you should all be on SP1. Service Pack 1 came out, I believe, last spring time period, which definitely had more fixes in it. If you're seeing specific things, though, we would love to hear them, and we're constantly releasing what we call cumulative updates, but basically they're hot fix roll-ups to fix issues like this, so we always want to hear when things aren't working. Did you say how to cross two projects? Oh, cross links. Sorry.
So a decision in project 1 impacts the timelines of the project 2.
Are you in a project server world or just standalone? So the question was, if you multiple projects, you tend to have cross-project links between them. How's the best way to do that? And in this case, in our project server world, you can just use cross-project links. Actually, I think one of the sessions later is I'm working with multiple projects and projects, so probably would be a good one to attend. I think I had that on my session list. A new feature that I'm not sure if Pradeep is going to be talking about in his next one is called the deliverables feature, but if you just search for it on Bing, you should find some information. And it's an easy way for one project to declare a deliverable, like, you know, we're doing feature A, and then another team to take a dependency on that deliverable, and it's not as cross-project links, they get kind of confusing because they'll automatically update your project, whereas deliverables will show you when things have changed, but then you update it how you think makes the most sense.
With very large, complex programs, we might have 5,000 tasks across multiple plans, and we want to capture maybe the 1,000 milestones within that 5,000 list. Any thoughts on how to do milestone tracking versus
Are you using Project Server?
Right now, desktop.
So the question was, huge projects, 5,000 tasks, they want to be an easy way to capture all the milestones across the task. If you're using Project Server, this is client talk, the best way for do that would be server reporting. That would be actually a very easy report you could build. So just if you ever move there in the future, know you have that option. For now, I mean, since you only have the project client, your only option is to create one big master project in them and then expand them all and filter on milestones. Can't think of anything better if you're all standalone projects.
One of the challenges is you tend to lose the predecessor, successor because those are task related versus the key milestones. And you want to show a critical path of milestones. So again, any thoughts on that?
So I guess for the people on the recording, I need to remember my questions. So he wants to, not just the milestones, but be able to show how they're related to each other. And normally the task dependencies are from task to task and not on the milestones. I'm going to have to think about that one. I don't have a great answer right now. Timeline view? No. Any other questions? Yes. So question is, does the SharePoint task list sync? Do you need SharePoint 2010? You do, because we're relying on some new task list functionality that wasn't in the previous releases. You can have SharePoint Foundation or any of SharePoint Enterprise Standard, any of the SharePoint 2010s work. One other thing before I take another question I wanted to also point out as a resource is I'm one of the writers on our project blog where a lot of the tips and tricks I've taken here we've posted about. The ideas come in by people posting questions. Definitely go here. Hopefully there's some things that will help you. If you have any ideas for blog posts, maybe the milestones question would be a good one. Let me know because I have trouble coming up with ideas sometimes. So I would appreciate that. Then any other questions? Oh, sorry.
Team builder and the planner conflict. Talk about how that's going to be resolved. When you move resources around the project professional, but there's no view on a matrix organization, and I have a team planner or a team builder, I can look at their utilization and how they're on the task. Kind of avoid that in the planner.
So the question is, if you're using Team Planner and Team Builder, if you're using Team Planner, if you're in a matrix organization, you might not have, as a project manager, I guess the ownership over the resources to be making those decisions. We kind of we're slightly matrixed, I guess you could say, in project, how we work, and lots of times we'll just have the two people sit in the room and figure it out. So we have the dev lead and the program manager both trying to get stuff done, sit together and determine how to use the resources. Also, you can screen cap the team planner and maybe like project manager figured out, this is how I want things to look. Send that picture on, get the permissions and stuff like that. So there's no like perfect way if you're in a matrix org, but there's a lot of tools to help you have the discussion then.
Can I shut that off?
Can you just turn off the team planner?
Administrate it out.
You might be able to remove it from the global. Question is,
But it will be removed whenever the user deletes their logo and key file.
yeah.
So he is able to recreate on his own when he knows what to do. So there is no chance for you to restrict that.
You can try to hide it by removing it from the global and removing the ribbon command from the ribbon, but people will be able to get there, especially because it's on the status bar. So it's more just educating your org if that's not a feature that works well with you guys, just to not use it. How are we on time? And we're at time, so I don't want you guys to miss lunch. Hopefully they did the food planning like we did.